2NURFM, a broadcast service of the University of Newcastle.
Associate Professor Jim Jones, good morning.
Morning, Todd.
Isn't it amazing? 1 week where we don't get a chance to have a chat, the election's announced, Bob Baldwin decides to hang up his hat, running to the next election. And I was reading over the weekend, before we have a look at who you think may replace Bob Baldwin, tax cuts. They're saying that if the coalition is voted back in at this year's federal election, we are in for some tax cuts. Surprise, surprise, surprise.
Yes, that is probably the least surprising news. Almost every election, the incumbent government goes to the polls sort of sometimes hinting, sometimes more formally saying that there will be a tax cut, especially with the budget sort of so close to the polls. It's one of those sort of almost foregone conclusions that this is what governments do. It's ironic, Todd, if I can just quickly add, that in between elections they bang on very, very loudly about, being frugal and doing all of this, that and the other when it comes to managing money. But come election time, there seems to be plenty of money to throw around to buy a few votes.
Yeah, are we just suckers? Because I've got to admit, I read the story in the paper and I thought, well, you know what? If the very least I get out of this election, don't care. I don't really care who gets in, because I think they're equally as incompetent at this stage. I'm sitting there thinking, well, if I wind up with $10 extra a week in my pocket, then that's a good outcome. I'm a sucker, aren't I? Because we seem, and I'm putting myself out the front, we seem to go, okay, all right, that's good.
Well, I think there'll be some people who will probably sort of just make the simple equation, well, a few extra dollars in my pocket, I'll vote for them. But I think when we look at it overall, most people are less concerned about the short term in that respect and more concerned about some of the long-term things that governments really need to be keeping an eye on.
Schools.
And a range of things. And if not having an extra $10 means that, the hospitals can be improved, or that they save that money somewhere else that they don't have to spend because the decision not to build this, that or the other, or to invest in a particular area for local infrastructure, if that means they're going to have to spend that money anyway, then most people seem to be willing to forego the tax cut in order to see it spent in a way that improves the quality of life overall.
But you want to see it done. You want proof that it has happened and it just hasn't magically disappeared in that amazing black hole.
You certainly don't want more promises and no action.
All right, Bob Baldwin, did you see that coming?
Well, not really, because I would have thought that having made a decision to stand, he would probably stick by it. I can well understand why he would sort of have second, third and fourth thoughts about it once he'd made the decision, but I would have thought the best time to have made that decision was much earlier, when the announcement of the redistribution had taken place and he could bow out sort of at an early stage. It's in a sense not too, it's obviously not too late, because although we're confident of when the election will be, the writs haven't been issued yet. So the Liberal Party still has time to appoint somebody to stand in his place. So he's given reasonable time. But no, I personally didn't see it coming. I thought he as the incumbent, he probably had the strongest chance of holding the seat for the Liberals.
Boundary changes, do you think that in the long run that was just the final nail in the coffin?
Possibly. It's hard to say, but I mean, we outside of the sort of political space where individuals are working in Parliament and so forth as elected members, it's a really, really tough, thankless job, regardless of some of the cynical things that we might think or see, and some of the stupidities that some individual politicians might do. Bob Baldwin's been a relatively hard-working member for his electorate, and it's a pretty thankless task, and you literally do sacrifice your family because you're on call more or less 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and even when you walk down to the local shops, someone's got you on the spotlight, and you can't even utter a sort of off-the-cuff remark without someone wanting to read more into it.
Yeah, exactly right. So who's going to take his place? What are the thoughts at the moment?
Well, there are a number of people who are sort of putting up their hand tentatively. There was a bit of a story over the weekend where the federal executive looked like they wanted, or I think it was the state executive perhaps, looked like they wanted to put Karen Howard in without serious consultation with the local branches, and quite rightly, I think the local branches arced up a little and said, hang on a second, parachuting someone into the electorate is not...
Never makes people happy, does it?
No. So, you can read that in a number of ways. Has the executive sort of queered the pitch for Karen Howard now? By putting her up, they've made sure that it's going to be much more difficult for her to get local support within the local branches. Or was it just simply a well-intentioned mistake on the part of the executive? Then there are a couple of other people who are sort of, I think, putting their hands up. Ken Jordan, the local councillor, I think, at Port Stephens, and also Bob Gagan from Maitland, a local councillor from Maitland. Each of them have a profile in half of the electorate, if you like.
It's the problem, isn't it?
And whether they have sufficient standing to cover the whole electorate and garnish the votes that they need. And then there's Michelle Moffat, and I don't know much about her either. So I think she's a part-time staffer in Bob's office as well, so along with Karen Howard. So it's difficult to see, but it's really a matter for the local branches to try and have some influence and the executive to listen to them. At the same time, they need to have a sufficiently high-profile candidate that can hold the seat against a pretty, what I would imagine be a pretty strong challenge from Meryl Swanson, who does have a bit more of a profile and is building it.
Okay, you can't keep all the people happy all of the time, so we're going to case of watch this space. Thank you very much, Jim Joes. We'll have a chat about politics next week.